Hey everyone, I'm Brad and this is Watch Rate Heart, and it's Friday, which means it's time for the watch list. It's where I discuss the films I've watched and my feelings about them. And this week, to continue the October festivities, it's time to watch movies about something that has enthralled true crime fans for decades, and that is serial killers. That's right, I have 4 films that involves a character that murders a lot of people. So let's take a stab at... No, let's take a shot... Alright, you know what? Okay, let's just review these movies, shall we? And I'm going to start with a movie I've been wanting to see since I watched The Red Shoes and The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. And that is Peeping Tom, directed by Michael Powell. This has a Letterboxd score of 4 out of 5, a Rotten Tomatoes score of 96% fresh, and this did not win or get nominated for any Oscars. I'm going to say, Peeping Tom is a very fascinating film. It feels ahead of its time in a number of ways, but mainly as a portrayal of a serial killer. This film feels like a film that could have been made today, and probably would have been just as effective, except I think for today they would actually show blood and all that stuff. But also the theme of morbid voyeurism is also especially timely. And Peeping Tom just had that same visceral reaction for me that I just really was not expecting from this. Let's move to the technical side a little bit. Powell's direction in this film, as usual, is great with some surprisingly rich visuals. The very first scene in the film, in a street where the main character picks up a hooker, and my god, that scene looks great. It looks fantastic. The way that the film uses color as well, like red and orange, is also really fascinating in certain scenes, especially when he's in his dark room, when he's watching the footage that he just made. I also think the leads of this film are really good. Carl Baum as the main character is especially good in this film. I think he has the right mix of creepy, but also weirdly sympathetic in a way. And then the main love interest in this film, played by Anna Massey, is also very good in this film. I really enjoy both characters, but I really like Baum in this film. I think he portrays the main character incredibly well. If I have one criticism, I think the film gets a touch too slow between killings. It's not intolerable. It's not something where I'm like, oh my god, I'm bored. But it just kind of goes on a little bit longer than I think it needs to. I think if the film was a little bit tighter, I think if this film was about 90 minutes, I think it would have been perfect. But for what it is, the slowness isn't terrible, but it does get to go on a little bit. But man, I am so glad I watched Peeping Tom. What a great movie. Overall, I'm giving it 4 stars out of 5 with a heart. It's an excellent movie. I really enjoyed this. It's very surprising watching this and realizing this is from the same people who did Black Narcissus, The Red Shoes, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, A Matter of Life and Death. But then when you watch the film visually, you definitely see those trademarks, the colors, the way that scenes are shot. I liked Carl Baum as the main character. I also liked Anna Massey as well as his love interest. But really, I think what the film shows is something that is strangely ahead of its time and that is still relevant today in a very disturbing way. And I think that's what really caught my eye in this film and I ended up really enjoying. So overall, 4 stars out of 5 for me for Peeping Tom. Alright, and I not only give you my opinions on films, I give you the opinions on the people of Letterboxd. And then we're going to start this first one with Will Sloan. Will Sloan just gives it a heart. And this is just one of his reviews, but I think he points out something that, needs to be pointed out. And he says, the camera is his dick, by the way. Thank you for that, Will. Next one is from Todd. Todd gives it 4 stars out of 5 with a heart. And Todd says, innovative all around with a clever script, interesting characters, and fun camera angles. It's a classic to be treasured. The use of camera angles is really well done in this, but I really think the cinematography, the use of colors, and how some of these scenes are shot are really well done in this. Definitely, Todd. Absolutely. Let's get into this third review. This one is from Elena. Elena's a little more muted with her opinion on this film. Elena gives it 3 stars out of 5, and she says, a unique psychological study, a reflection on cinema, peculiar in its cinematographic approach. Highly original, breaking from more simplistic fare of the Powell and Pressburger releases that preceded it. Unsurprisingly, this unconventional and personal work was highly controversial at the time. I bet it was. The corruption of the human soul on screen and the audience equal in disgust and sympathy proved provocative enough to have a lasting impact. Now, back then, I bet people were disgusted by this as well. I think nowadays, this is kind of old hat in a way. A lot of serial killer or crime films likes to also make you feel bad for the villain as well in a lot of these types of films. I think the equal disgust and sympathy is not going to be felt as much unless in those films he does some really heinous crap. But I also think Peeping Tom was ahead of its time when it came to this type of storytelling. And finally, this last review is from Michelle Kisner. Michelle gives it 4 stars out of 5. And she says, I love the way Mark was characterized, lonely and withdrawn, always hiding behind his camera. The lighting was fantastic too, especially his red room where he had his showings. Yet another killer with mommy issues and ultimately tragic. Wouldn't you say he had daddy issues though? I mean, okay, yeah, he definitely had mommy issues, but really, I think another thing that made this film really interesting and ahead of its time is that it gave the character a reason why he became the way he became. I think a lot of films back then, probably more like in the 50s, this is a 60s film, but like maybe in the 50s and 40s, people would be abhorrently evil for just being evil. There was really no other way around it for a lot of those films. So I think making him a tragic figure and a sympathetic figure as to what happened to him is what makes this film a little different from films from that time. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't seen a lot of 60s films, so I might be wrong on that. I definitely agree with Michelle. The way that he's characterized, both as explained in the film, but also how he acts is really well done. I agree. I am so glad I watched Peeping Tom. I've wanted to watch this for a long time, and it was kind of hard to find it on streaming for a while until Criterion re-released it on 4K and on Blu-ray, which once it was available, I snatched it up, and I'm so glad I did. Fascinating movie, especially if you like serial killer movies, but even if you like them more darker and twisted and bloody like they are nowadays, I think you'll find it a very interesting film to watch. So I would definitely say check out Peeping Tom.
Our seats are good enough.
We're all 44.
On the floor? Bam!
Next, we have a film that I was morbidly curious about. See what I did? Sorry. And that's Trap, starring Josh Hartnett and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. It has a Letterboxd score of 2.6 out of 5, a Rotten Tomatoes score of 57% rotten, and it was not nominated or won any Oscars. And I gotta be honest with you, when I started watching this film, and up to a certain point, I was dumbfounded by the Letterboxd score, because I was really enjoying this movie. I was like, wow, this is really great. Everything in the concert part of the movie is actually incredibly well done. It's almost, oh God, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I'm going to. Oh God, okay. It's almost Hitchcockian with how good it is. It really made me feel like if Hitchcock was still here, this is kind of what he would make. Again, I was really enjoying it. And I think Hartnett was really good as the main character in the film. He performs him perfectly, both when he's trying to be the perfect dad and that really fake, cheesy smile, and then when he's trying to be more duplicitous. I think he does a really good job with that. But my God, there must be only one way for M. Night Shyamalan to get any sexual pleasure, and that is to write twists in scripts. Holy shit, how many twists do there need to be in this movie? The first twist that happened in the film, oh yeah, spoilers, there's a twist in the M. Night Shyamalan movie. I'm sorry if I spoiled that for you. But the first twist in this film, I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting, okay. And the second twist, I was like, oh, okay. All right, if it ends well, okay. And then it did another one, and another one, and another one. And I'm like, holy shit, dude. How many of them do you need? And every subsequent twist would just bog down the quality of the film. And almost every twist, I'm like, oh God, what are they doing? Why won't it end? Why won't it end? And by the time they finally got to the final twist, which, oh my God. When they got to the final twist, then you're like, Oh wait, there's another twist on top of it. Like, why? Why are we doing this? Why? I don't understand. God damn, like, it makes the ending completely unsatisfying and annoying. Think about this for a second, okay? I went from thinking that this film is actually a good 4-star movie. Like, I'm really enjoying this. But by then, from the 4-star, when you take loads and loads of twists that bog down the entire story to the point where it then just becomes completely unsatisfying and annoying, I went from a 4-star to the rating I'm giving right now, which is 2.5 stars out of 5. I am basically right there with the Letterboxd community on this, and I am actually kind of stunned. I was really enjoying this movie. I was really enjoying the concert aspect of the movie, which I think is like the first 2 acts of the film. I think it's really good. I think the way it's shot is very well done, and Hartnett throughout, to me, is great in the film, whether the twists are bad or not. I think he's actually really good in this film. But man, why was there so many twists? Like, we go into an M. Night Shyamalan movie expecting a twist at this point. It almost would be a twist to not have a twist in an M. Night Shyamalan movie. I know I am not the first person who said that. But honestly, there are times where I feel like I have to defend M. Night Shyamalan. Like, there are films that people hate of his that I actually kind of enjoy. The Village is one of them. I actually really like The Village. And I had friends who were just like, that movie was shit. And I'm like, nah, that was not bad, actually. I liked it. But yeah, like, this movie went from being really good to then just barely passable because of the twists that were constantly coming, and by the ending being completely unsatisfying. So 2.5 stars out of 5 for me for Trap. All right, and let's get into Letterboxd reviews. This first review is from Zoe Rose Bryant. Zoe gives it 4 stars out of 5 with a heart. And she says, TLDR, don't fuck with a girl dad. You know, guys, honestly, there were so many comments just like Zoe's here, where it's like, oh, this is what you get for messing with a girl dad. Really, guys? Or is it just because it's Josh Hartnett? Like, is that what it is? I mean, if you have a crush on Josh Hartnett, I understand. That's fine. I worry about some of you sometimes. Seriously. Let's get into the next one, which is Buddy O. Buddy O gives it 3.5 stars out of 5. And Buddy says, Josh Hartnett's that tall MFer who stands in front of you halfway through a concert and ruins your experience. Yeah, I was thinking about that actually watching the film. I'm like, man, there's nothing but tweens and like mid-teenage girls that are standing there, and there's like 6'7" Josh Hartnett towering above all of them, and I can't even imagine what that's like. All right, so let's get to the next review. This review is from Matthias Larson. Matthias Larson gives it 1.5 stars out of 5. And he says, M. Night strikes again. The only director who consistently makes terrible movies and somehow manages to be considered by many as auteur. Bro disappoints every fucking time. I don't know why I even watch his movies. It's such a mystery. He's like the worst important filmmaker out there. Do people consider him an auteur still? I mean, is he? Okay, leave it in the comments. Do you still consider him an auteur? I don't. I just think he's a genre director at this point. He's a genre director that has a very specific style. Well, I guess that is kind of an auteur. I guess I answered my own question. But I don't find him to be all that important. God, I think after Lady in the Water, his career just went right down the shitter. And then he made a comeback with The Visit, I think. But after that, I've never considered him one of the more important directors out there. I know there was that article in in 2000 that was considering him the next Spielberg. I think it was Newsweek who did that. Even at age 16, 17, I was like looking at that and going, a little too soon? I think The Sixth Sense was his second film. His first film was not a thriller. I know that. That movie was his second film, and I was looking at that going, I don't know about that. But I will say this, though. Larson's problem with having to watch every one of his films, even though you hate them, is kind of like me with the Fast and the Furious films. I generally do not like them, but I feel compelled to watch them every single time. So, Matthias, I know exactly how you feel. And this last review is from Jesse Frost. Jesse gives it 3 stars out of 5, and he says, Trap? More like Thirst Trap? Guys, calm down. Seriously, I know he's attractive. All right, so let's get past the thirst traps and the girl dad thing as well, and just get right down to brass tacks. I was really enjoying Trap until the third act, and it just slowly started falling apart into a mess at the end. But honestly, I'm kind of expecting that from M. Night Shyamalan nowadays, either to watch something and go, whoa, that was really good, or being like, what the fuck are you doing? Why? Why are you doing this? So that's kind of what you walk into with an M. Night Shyamalan film. So I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy Trap. I did. I liked it in the end. But man, it could have been so much better. Next is the Japanese crime thriller Vengeance is Mine, directed by Shohei Imamura. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.9 out of 5, a Rotten Tomatoes score of 100% fresh, which, by the way, I think is about 11 reviews, so take that with a grain of salt. And it was not nominated for or won any Oscars at the time it was released. And I gotta be honest, when I first heard about this film, I was expecting something much more disturbing and unsettling. I mean, it's definitely bloody in spots, I will give it that. It's an interesting story about murder, perversion, and what makes someone inhumane. But what's interesting about the film is also how it's structured. In the beginning of the film, the main character is caught, and it kind of cycles back where he is describing what he did, how he did his crimes, what led him to do what he did, and it's interesting, but it's clinical. It's very cold. It's very distant, which is a lot like the main character of this film, which, by the way, Ken Ogata does a very good performance in this film as the main character and the serial killer, so I want to just point that out right away. And basically, this film is essentially Catch Me If You Can if it's about murder and not check fraud. I do like the film, but I do have a number of issues with it. First off, did it really need to be 2 hours and 30 minutes? This film drags, and this drags for a while, too. What basically happens is in the first act of the film, you get the first few murders. And then the second act, the main character ends up in this hotel with the set of characters that inhabit it. And there are these weird dynamics and things going on in that hotel. And the film kind of stays there while also dealing with the killer's father and his wife in this really weird sexual relationship that's going on between them. And it just kind of goes on for a while with really not a lot going on. The structure also is a bit of a problem because it kind of muddles the story itself. Again, the film is supposed to be the killer reenacting everything that happened in his time, and yet they go to parts where the killer was never involved. They go into what's going on with his father and his wife. They go into what's going on in the hotel. And it muddles the narrative to a point where it really just slows everything down, and I just didn't think it was really all that necessary. And like I mentioned before, I didn't really feel much of anything in this film except really cold and distant, which really may have been the point to actually get you into the skin of the killer. I don't think it really helps the film's cause. The film's pretty clinical in a lot of ways. It treats everything very matter of fact. And to a point, I do appreciate that, but then on the other hand, it kind of makes it feel like that the film just kind of doesn't care what the main character does. It's actually really strange. I didn't really feel much of anything towards any character in the film. I think with one exception, I think the relationship between the father and the wife is like the one thing where I'm watching going, this is kind of interesting, but really doesn't belong in this movie, I think. It's just an added subplot that kind of distracts from the main point. But other than that, like, I really didn't feel much of anything going on in this film. I didn't even really feel disgust. That was the weirdest thing. I'm like, I should be grossed out by some of this, but I'm just sitting here going, alright, whatever. And speaking of, a lot of this film is spent with other characters. A lot of them really aren't all that interesting. Like, the whole subplot in the inn, I just felt dragged and dragged and dragged and dragged. The characters themselves aren't badly written, but they're just not that compelling. They're not that interesting. And a lot of time is spent there. So that's why it kind of feels like the film drags on for a long period of time. I really think if they cut that section up a lot better, I think it would have been a lot more interesting. Maybe concentrate on the killer and the woman he ends up having a sexual relationship with a little bit more, but they go on a little too long on that end. I'm pretty conflicted about Vengeance is Mine. I really thought I was going to get a much more disturbing and disorienting film, but it really is a very clinical and cold type of film. That said, I'm going to give the film 3 stars out of 5. I think it's actually pretty good. I think it's actually pretty good overall, but I just have a number of issues with the film that I think really hold holds it back. I think the structure, although interesting, does muddle the entire narrative in a lot of ways. And I also think that the film spends a lot of time on side characters that are just not all that compelling. I do think Ken Ogata does a very good job as the killer in this film, but honestly, I was expecting something a lot more disturbing, and something that has a lot more of an emotional resonance, and I just felt cold, and I just felt like I didn't care all that much about what was going on. Even when the disturbing stuff was happening, I was like, alright. Yeah, that's kind of what I expect. So, overall, 3 stars out of 5 for me for Vengeance is Mine. Now, let's get into the Letterboxd reviews. There's going to be less than I usually have, mainly because there's not a lot of reviews on this movie. So let's start with Marco. Marco gives it 3.5 stars out of 5 with a heart. And Marco says, good movie based on the life of a real serial killer. However, I didn't enjoy the non-linear narrative in such a big movie. I think that really is the big problem, is that the film is big. It is about 2 hours and 30 minutes. And for it to be non-linear and that long, you need some kind of through line to keep me invested, and there just wasn't anything there. Let's get into this next review. This next review is from Supreme Lemon. Supreme Lemon gives it 3 stars out of 5 with a heart, and Supreme Lemon says, producers, don't you think you should tone down all the sexual themes? Shohei Imamura, the fuck you say to me, you little shit? Yeah, like, there is a lot of sexual themes in this film, and I guess there's a point to that, but I don't think it really helps the narrative all that well. Like, the thing with the killer's wife and his father would be a lot more fascinating if, I guess, more time was spent on it, but then really I would rather have a film about that than about the killer. And then when you get into the inn, there's even more sexual themes. There's someone who peeps on, there is a power dynamic in the relationship between the person who runs the inn and the person who owns the inn, and then there's the sexual relationship that happens with the killer and that woman. Like, there's a lot of sexual themes in this film. I think if you would have just pulled it out into its own film, it would have been a lot more interesting. But again, it's just too much in this film specifically. And this last review is from KYK. KYK gives it 3 stars out of 5, and they say, I threatened to log this on Letterboxd as Vengeance is fine. Honestly, you probably should. That was actually not bad. I'll give you that. A bit boring for a good chunk in the middle, but the latter half, when it explores this Oshima-esque nihilistic romance, is really good, especially when it's countered with the killer's relationship with his father. You know, I gotta be honest, if the film was just about that, I would say that would have been pretty interesting. Just turn it from like a 2 hour and 30-minute film to maybe a 100-minute film based off of those relationships and those themes itself. I think that would have been pretty good. But even then, like, the romance at the end of the film between the killer and the lady who runs the hotel, I don't think is all that compelling, but if spent more time with it and to develop the themes of nihilism in there, I think KYK is right. It would have been a much more interesting film. But the way it is now, but as I see Vengeance is Mine, I really think it's kind of a messy film that had a very good idea, and the clinical and cold look at what this person is doing could work if the characters were a lot more interesting and dynamic, but they're just really not. And I think it's mostly to do with the fact that there's so many characters and so little time is spent with a lot of them. And the ones that I'm really interested in, which would be the father and the wife, you don't spend a lot of time in, and they just come back and forth in key scenes in the film. But again, Vengeance is Mine is an interesting film. I do understand why this was recommended. I'll recommend it slightly, but I think there are better films that tackle this subject. Finally, our last film is from South Korean filmmaster Bong Joon-Ho, and that is Memories of Murder. It has a Letterboxd score of 4.4 out of 5, which makes it the number 51 of the top 250 narrative films on Letterboxd. It has a Rotten Tomatoes of 95% fresh, and it was not nominated or won any Oscars, but really, all the best films never do, so we'll go from there. Man, there is a lot to say about this film that is incredibly positive. So I'm going to start with the negative, and that is that the epilogue at the end felt a little unnecessary. Okay, now to the positives. Man, I love this movie. This is a very captivating detective film. I think the actual story involving the murders and trying to find who killed these girls is really captivating and very interesting to watch. It keeps you invested, and how it does that is by not only showing bits and pieces of the crime and seeing it escalate, but also how the detectives are also reacting reacting to what's going on as well, and the town around it. It's also because the visuals of this film are also really good. In fact, the visuals in some parts are stunning. There is one specific scene in the film. I'll just call it the chase sequence. And it is especially well executed, not only by visuals, but the pacing of it and the music that accompanies it, and also the humor involved in it as well. That's, oh god, another thing about this film that is so good. Not only is this a very serious film, and it can be a very upsetting film at times, but it is funny in spots. There are some really funny scenes in this film that helps break the tension, but doesn't break it too much. You still feel the tension when the crimes start to happen. Now that I mentioned the music, let me talk about that a little bit. At first, I kind of felt it was out of place. It just seems a little too romantic, but by the end, it's actually quite beautiful and actually really fits with the film. I was very surprised with the music and how well that was worked. And honestly, Memories of Murder is the perfect mix of detective drama, thoughtful commentary, satire, and comedy, and it all lands incredibly well. Like, really, I am still surprised by how some scenes work so damn well, especially with what goes on in the film. But it works incredibly well. I am still surprised how well it works. Okay, so let me just get into the rating. My rating for Memories of Murder is 4.5 out of 5, which is the highest I go when it comes to a first watch for me. This is easily Bong Joon-Ho's best film. Yes, I think it's better than Parasite. This film is excellent. It has the perfect mix when it comes to cop procedural, satire, thoughtful commentary, comedy. It works incredibly well, and it's beautifully shot. The music is really good. It just feels like everyone in this film was working on another level in a way that few ever do. I will put it this way. I think this belongs in the pantheon of films like Fargo and Chinatown as one of the best crime films ever made. It is a fantastic movie. I loved watching this movie. It was thrilling and funny and just smart from the beginning all the way into the end. I absolutely adored Memories of Murder. So, 4.5 stars out of 5 for me for Memories of Murder. Man, if you haven't seen it, see it. It is amazing. All right, let's get into the final reviews from Letterboxd. This one's from MGel03. MGel gives it 4.5 stars out of 5 with a heart, the same one I got. And MGel says, Memories of Murder is a thrilling phenomenon from director Bong Joon-Ho, with amazing visuals and impressive performances. Yes, the performances are really good in this film. It's packed with satire and entertainingly familiar investigative tropes, but the pacing sometimes drag for no real reason. I don't agree. You know what? I'm going to ask MGel. Hopefully he watches this video. But MGel, what exactly did you think actually dragged? I didn't feel that the pacing dragged at all. I just felt the epilogue was a little unnecessary. But I would love to know what your thoughts of what you think dragged in that film. But overall, I completely agree with MGel on this one. It's interesting. The film kind of feels like a cross between Chinatown and some of those 90s cop procedural buddy comedies in a way. But it's mixed so well that it just works incredibly well. Again, to the second review. This one is from Jizz Monkey. Oh my god, my favorite name. Jizz Monkey gives it 4 stars out of 5, and I'm assuming it's a him. He says, enthusiastic consumption of what looks like seriously delicious food, random and glorious brawling, a compelling story, some of the best usages of footwear in a movie yet, and much other awesomeness. Turn what could have been a regular 3-star procedural into a highly enjoyable and remarkably deep 4-star procedural. Yeah, I see no fault in what he's saying. Absolutely. Agree with almost everything that Jizz Monkey is saying on here. It definitely takes what in some instances would just be a run-of-the-mill like cop procedural and just makes it so much more. Let's get into the third review. This one is from Stephen Clark. Stephen gives it 5 stars out of 5 with a heart, and he's got a simple one. 5 stars for the fly kicks. And I gotta say, some of the laughs in this film is watching that one guy just drop kick people randomly. And literally, it's random. Like, you never expect it. They can just be talking to somebody. All of a sudden, he just drop kicks somebody. It's hilarious. The implications are kind of messed up, but it's still hilarious when you watch it. Oh my god. I love the fly kicks. And this last review is from Nora. Nora gives it 4.5 stars out of 5 with a heart. And Nora says, you, Zodiac 2007, invented crime cinema. Me, an intellectual. Actually, you mean Memories of Murder from 2003? Yeah, Nora. Oh, man. That kind of sounds like me when I was younger. Oh, boy. But I deal with those people, too. They're Absolutely annoying. But anyway, yeah. I think people who love Zodiac but haven't seen this should definitely watch this movie. I don't know if you'll like it better than you like Zodiac, but man, Memories of Murder is an amazing film. And there's really nothing more I can say about that. The main point I want to get across at the end of this is basically this. Memories of Murder belongs in the same list as Fargo, as Chinatown, and then as any other crime films that are beloved as some of the best ever made. And that is all I can say about the quality of Memories of Murder. Fantastic movie. And that is it for this episode of Watch Rate Heart. But before I go, let me ask you a question. When he retires or his career is over, what do you think M. Night Shyamalan's legacy will be? I know that as his films release, he gets a lot of shit for his movies. But I also noticed that there seems to be a fan base that grows with every movie that he does, except for, like, The Last Airbender. Like, everyone hates that movie. And for good reason. It's horrible. I honestly think that M. Night Shyamalan will be more of a cult director who just got lucky enough to get mainstream budgeting for his films. I think that's what it's going to turn into. He will be an anomaly. He'll be somebody that will get these really good actors to do kind of strange movies, if you really think about it. He'll have no problem financing it. I think he finances this on his own now. And he will have these weird kind of movies that either really work or really do not work. But they'll fascinate film lovers as time goes on. I think The Sixth Sense will always be the movie that he'll be known for in the mainstream. But I think as 20 or 30 years go down, there's going to be another film in his oeuvre, as they would call it, that will be his champion film. And it'll be a film that people hated at first, but then all of a sudden, as time goes on, really, really adore. That's what I think his legacy will be when he's done. If you liked any of the reviewers I highlighted in this episode, you can check the video description for a link to their Letterboxd profile, and be sure to give them a follow, and let them know that Brad from Watch Rate Heart sent you. You can follow me on Letterboxd and X at Watch Rate Heart. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and share with your friends. I'm Brad from Watch Rate Heart. Thank you for watching, and remember, we all watch and rate movies, but you give them the heart that makes them live forever.